In September-November 2023, the leader of the armed Afghan opposition, Ahmad Masoud, was in France. He was received by Macron and other high-ranking officials, expressing support for him in every possible way. Interviews with him were published in the country's central media. What is the reason for such a warm reception of the head of the Afghan opposition in Paris? Who is his main lobbyist there? What connected France with Masood's father and the Taliban? And how has Paris's policy towards Afghanistan changed over the past 100 years? AZfront gives an explanation. Against the backdrop of Paris's increasing ties with Central Asia, Macron's military and political patronage of Armenia, the failure of French diplomacy in Africa, and complications in the Middle East, France's political establishment is increasingly inclined to actively support the armed opposition to the Taliban, which is ruling Afghanistan. Before President Macron's November visits to Astana and Tashkent, and Kyrgyz President Japarov's trip to Paris, the leader of the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan, Ahmad Masoud, had been in France for almost a month since September 26th. He is the main opposition figure in Afghanistan against the Taliban. He was received by the head of the Senate, Gerard Larcher, the leader of the Republicans' Party, Éric Ciotti, and the president of the Regional Council of Île-de-France, Valérie Pécresse. On October 4th, Masoud stated, "This is the first time we have felt such a shift in perspective, such a benevolent treatment." On October 20th, he announced at the end of the visit, "Thank you, France, for standing beside Afghanistan in these trying times." Only a few weeks later, Masoud reappeared in France, ostensibly to participate in the Paris Peace Forum 2023, on the margins of which he met with Macron on November 10th. It is worth noting that it was in November when a sharp intensification of armed groups led by Masoud happened in several regions of Afghanistan. Bernard-Henri Levy became the main lobbyist for the Afghan opposition leader's son in the French political establishment. In 2021, Levy admitted, France is providing him with the most advanced assistance. In March of that year, Macron hosted Masoud at the Élysée Palace. In August, the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, called on Macron to support, encourage, and help Masoud. At the same time, the president of the Regional Council of Île-de-France, Valérie Pécresse, noted that France should help the resistance and convince Europe that our fight against Islamist terrorism requires a common strategy. Since 2021, Masoud has been working to revive the brainchild of his famous father, Ahmad Masoud, who was killed by al-Qaeda militants in 2001. From 1996 until his death, he led the Northern Alliance, an alliance of Afghanistan's minorities oppressed by the Taliban, most of whom are Pashtuns. France's surreptitious return to Afghanistan through support for Masoud comes against the backdrop of a symbolic anniversary. 100 years ago, Paris made its first attempts to enter the Afghan geopolitical field, which was a traditional site of rivalry between Britain and Russia. In 1923, the Constitution of Afghanistan was adopted, drafted with the participation of French advisors. At the same time, in spite of London and Moscow, Paris began supplying arms to Kabul. The professor of Sorbonne University, Alfred Fouché, became the progenitor of the country's higher education system. But then France forgot about distant Afghanistan for almost 60 years. Another intensification began only after the Soviet troops entered Kabul in 1979. The following year, Paris voiced condemnation of Moscow's policy. As Alexander Lakovsky, assistant head of the operational group of the USSR Ministry of Defense in Afghanistan, notes in his book, in the early 1980s, there were 7 NGOs in France supporting the Afghan opposition to the pro-Soviet regime in Kabul. The 1980s saw the establishment of French ties with the leadership of the Tajik opposition, led by Ahmad Masood. According to Liakovsky, French engineers managed the mining of emeralds in the Panjshir Valley, which was under Masood's control. A significant part of precious stones was sold through Pakistan to France. The money was used to buy weapons. On September 21, 2001, the French magazine Le Point reported, France's covert support for the Afghan resistance began in the late 1980s. DGSE contributed to the training of 2 resistance groups, one led by Amin Wardak and the other by Masoud. Several dozen military cadres traveled to France for secret training. According to Le Point, despite protests from DGSE operatives, assistance to Ahmad Masood was cut off after the fall of the socialist government in Kabul in 1992. Contacts with him resumed in 1997 at the height of his confrontation with the Taliban. But according to the book Quand la France préférait les Taliban, Massoud in Memoriam, from then until 2001, there was a continuous behind-the-scenes struggle in the French establishment between advocates of supporting the Taliban's resistance and lobbyists of the military industry. The latter did not want to spoil relations with Pakistan, which was the backer of the Taliban movement. In 1997 to 1999, several former and current French parliamentarians and municipal figures visited Ahmad Masood in Panjshir. On September 4, 1997, the Taliban accused Paris of supporting him. In early 2000, former ambassador to Kabul, Jean-Yves Berthaud, met with him in Dushanbe. In June of the same year, Ahmad Shah welcomed a delegation of 5 MEPs in Panjshir. 4 of them represented France. On October 4, 2000, the newspaper Liberation urged, "The EU must support Commander Massoud." In April 2001, Ahmad Massoud's only visit to Europe took place. It was held at the invitation of the French Foreign Ministry when Paris first publicly announced financial support for him. Later, Le Monde and L'Express admitted that the French intelligence services had supplied arms to Ahmad Massoud. But at the same time, French policy in Afghanistan had the opposite tendency. From 7 to the 14th of September 2000, the Taliban's deputy foreign minister was in Paris at the invitation of the Foreign Ministry of France. Just on September 14th, the French oil company Total Fine Elf concluded a partnership agreement and acquired 60% of the Pak Arab Refinery Company, owned by the governments of Pakistan and the UAE. On December 19, 2000, the Council of Europe adopted a resolution tightening sanctions against the Taliban government. But French diplomats made considerable efforts to soften the approved measures. On February 7, 2001, the French Foreign Ministry received the Minister of Health of Taliban, Mullah Abbas. On November 21, 2001, during a session of the National Assembly, MP Alain Madelin called on Prime Minister of France, Lionel Jospin, to comment on the Taliban's possession of advanced French missiles. He chose to remain silent. The Caucasus and Middle East is closer to Europe and US than it seems at first glance. Subscribe and click on the bell in order to be informed of the main events. See you soon.